So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I am Andrew Shire. I'm the Director of Client Solutions here at Catalyst Solutions. We are very pleased to be hosting our webinar today, Improve Your Health Plan's Operational Efficiencies while Reducing Errors and Costs. Just real quick, an overview of some of the things that really Christine will talk about today. We'll, of course, introduce our speaker, Christine Henderson, who you can see on the screen here. We'll share with you, who is Catalyst for those of you who might not otherwise be familiar with who we are as an organization. And then we'll dive into really where Christine will discuss the administrative burdens that health plans face today. And really how targeted solution sessions, or TSSs as we call them, help with many of these burdens, including what might need to be considered and what the scope might entail for these TSSs. She'll also share some common high-level solutions or recommendations, and we will, of course, have time for questions and answers. Now, I will ask that if you do have questions, feel free to drop those in the Q&A section within this Zoom. You should see that if your screen is like mine at the bottom of the window here. Now, if we do run out of time, we will collect the questions asked and answer and get those sent out over email to everyone. So we'll also send out a video link afterwards for your reference as well, should you miss any part of this webinar. Introduction. So as mentioned, today our speaker is Ms. Christine Henderson. She is the Vice President of Consulting here at Catalyst. Just quickly, a little bit about Christine. She has great depth of experience, over 20 years of in-the-weeds health plan and operations experience, driving cost transformation initiatives throughout multiple health plans that ultimately improve member health outcomes. She has successfully managed operations programs, bringing a wealth of innovation, process optimizations, and efficiencies. She's managed systems integrations, configuration initiatives, and installations of systems. She's also had the pleasure of managing BPO services. Her experience spans nearly all lines of business, including Medicaid, Medicare, exchange, commercial, ASO, and fully insured programs. I'm quite confident Christine will probably missing at least one other line of business on here for you. But in any case, last but not least, Christine has an exceptional depth of legislative, functional, and business expertise. Next slide. Briefly, just a little bit about Catalyst for those of you who may not know who we are. Catalyst Solutions is a woman-owned and diversity certified health plan services and consulting firm. We've been around for over 23 years, bringing a great depth of experience partnering exclusively with health plans. Health plans are our center circle and our sole focus. We support all lines of business, many of which that Christine's experience just demonstrated, including but not limited to commercial, Medicare Advantage, Medicaid, duals, exchange, so on and so forth. So pretty much if a health plan out there works in it, we very much support it. We have clients throughout the country with membership ranging from startups to over 25 million in membership. We help in several ways, including outsource IT, BPO, and consulting services, which specifically consulting services can include technical, operational, and strategic consulting. Our mission is to help payers drive down costs, optimize their revenue, and of course, improve member healthcare outcomes, right? That's what we're here for. Catalyst delivers comprehensive and flexible solutions that meet the unique needs of payers. And last but not least, we are very passionate about making a positive and measurable change on behalf of our clients that we serve and the communities in which we live. We're all a part of this. With that, Christine, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Andrew. I will give the disclaimer right up front that Andrew is a much better speaker than I. So don't set your expectations super high with me, but thank you all for joining us today. So what we wanted to talk about are administrative burdens and ways to address those administrative burdens. So the United States spends more on administrative costs than any other developed country when we look at healthcare spend. And there's a lot of reasons for that, a lot of reasons that y'all are probably intimately aware with. But if you look at how healthcare is run compared to other industries, healthcare requires 770 full-time workers for $100 billion of revenue, compared with other industries, which take about 100 workers per 1 billion of revenue. And like I said, there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of legislative burdens on healthcare. There are a lot of inefficiencies as far as our systems and the way we share data, the way we gather data, the way we use data. And some of these things can be fixed and other things, are a little trickier. So when you look at administrative costs, historically, many health plans have spent a substantial portion of the premiums on administrative costs. However, as most of you are probably very aware, when the Affordable Care Act came into place, that was kind of legislated down so that at least 80% of your premium dollars have to be spent on medical care. So what that does for all of us that are in the operation space, it really kind of turns the screws on us finding ways to do things with fewer resources, fewer dollars, and just more efficiently. So we're under increasing pressure year after year to lower our costs and just become more efficient. So when we talk about what makes up administrative costs, there's a lot of things. And most of these, some we have control over, some we don't. When we talk about salaries of executive bonuses, things like that, how some of the C-suite executives are compensated in the healthcare industry, that most of us on this call, we have little to no control over that. We look at marketing expenditures. Marketing expenditures, some of that would be, your quality reporting, things like that, out that you have to do reporting out to CMS, to the state, things and like that would fall under those categories. When we look at back-end office functions and costs, and we start looking at things that we can make an actual substantial efficiency gain in and kind of release some of those administrative burdens. We're talking about things like, prior authorizations, things like that, credentialing costs, claim management, customer service. I mean, there's a lot of money with customer service, and that's an administrative burden of calls coming in where you can see some efficiencies gained by, customers are not real fond of phone trees, but there are ways to use phone trees and IVR that are customer centric and can save some money. Another way that you can really look at and those administrative burdens lessening is to get rid of ineffective, non-standard business processes and system. When we look at reporting, when we look at products that we're using, when we're looking at our credentialing process, our provider contracts, every time something is non-standard, every time we make an exception just this once and make this contract so it has to be manually priced, or make this benefit under this product so that it can't auto-adjudicate in your claim engine. There's a dollar cost associated with that, and that dollar cost adds up into our administrative burden. So when we look at cost drivers and we look at ways that we can get rid of some of the cost drivers that are administrative burdens that you all are facing day to day, look at automating tasks. I mean, the big one that most of us look at are claims processing. If you look at your auto adjudication rate or your AA rate, and it's sitting down in the 70s, low 80s, there is all kinds of opportunity to make that better. And there's all kinds of ways to find out why that AA or that auto adjudication rate is not higher. I always tell people the engine is only doing what you programmed it to do. So if it's dropping a claim out of auto adjudication, it's hitting against a rule, a pen, something that is telling that system, don't try to pay this, send it to an actual person. And as soon as you send it to an actual person, every time someone touches that, it's about $11 in administrative costs. And then when you look at a claim that gets routed, let's say you route it to UM, and then you route it to high dollar claims, and then it has multiple surgery, and you have to route it to those examiners. The constant rerouting of the claims, every time someone touches it, it adds that $11 again. So really, when you look at automating tasks, and we'll kind of go through the best way to find the root cause of it, that's an area that usually will give you some immediate gains and some immediate savings. Another one is what I was just speaking about a minute ago when I said standardize your contracts and your products. A lot of times, a contract is made with a provider. I've seen plans where that contract is now 20 years old. It is so non-standard and hasn't kept up with the industry pricing. Really go in and standardize those contracts and standardize your products with an eye on what can auto-adjudicate, what can automatically update in your system, what can automatically price. I know it gets more complicated. Back in the olden days when I started, I think Andrew said, I've been in healthcare since the dinosaurs, and that's pretty much true. You'd see a lot of the contracts that was just a percentage off billed. That's not done anymore because, you know, that scam was very easy to decipher, that providers would just increase the amount billed by the percentage of discount you were taking. So I understand the complexity of the contracts, but there still is standardization that can be done that can really get you some efficiencies. The other one is invest in self-service for your high volume, low complexity transactions, like calls in for eligibility verification, calls in for claim status, things like that. That can be self-service. And a lot of these calls are coming from providers, and providers really don't want to talk to us anyway. They are in a very high production environment. They have 1,400 different calls to make today. They just want to know, did the pre-authorization go through? Do the people have benefits? What's their copay? Is their coverage still active? So self-service in that arena, either on the phone or on the web, works wonderfully. Outsourcing non-core tasks. I think sometimes we think as a health plan, paying claims or answering calls is our core task, but it's really not our core task. The core task is the service that's given to the member. So if it's a low complexity thing and, you know, you're in an area where, you know, the salaries and things like that, we have a couple of clients that we help in places like New York and California, and we can support them in geographical areas that have a lower salary base. It can really help them with that outsourcing of non-core tasks. Of course, with that, you have to think, you know, there was a big push to move things offshore. That doesn't always work out as well as you think it does. And it can't work out in the case of Medicaid payers. Most states will make you keep it onshore. The other one is really target your care management. Use risk stratification to target disease management programs to the members that will benefit from their program participation. And as soon as I say this, if you're a Medicaid payer, I can feel you rolling your eyes because I've been in that seat and I understand it's really hard to get that engagement with different products. But there are tools on the market that you can use to help get that engagement and really target the people that are receptive and that you can really drive some costs and some change for them. The other one is to eliminate paper. I would think that this would be redundant to say because I thought we got rid of paper quite some time ago, but I will go into health plans that are not using an advanced OCR technology to scan their paper claims, that are not requiring that their providers submit claims through an EDI or a gateway so they come in electronically. There's a lot of really good OCR technology that can read various different forms, that can read handwritten forms, all this kind of stuff. Not only HCFAs and UB's claim forms, but it also can help with eligibility and things like that. The OCR technology that's out there is not what it was 10 or 15 years ago. It really is amazing. And it almost pairs with almost a machine learning or an IA kind of role where it can actually look for certain roles or names or words in a contract and pull out the data from a handwritten contract, which is amazing. When I talk about our targeted solutions session overview and what that really is. So what it is you are taking a look at a certain operational part of your health plan and trying to better understand the root cause of it. So you figure out the root cause of it, and then you figure out the cost of that problem, and then you start moving into ways you can fix that. So, you know, Catalyst does do TNS engagements, and it's a way to kind of test drive us, but this is also something that you could internally with just a few little drivers. I would say if you're going to do a targeted solution, align one like full-time cat wrangler or PM or a really good business analyst or something like that, because it is a process and you want to make sure that you're being very thorough in your process. I kind of approach it just because I am a Six Sigma black belt, so I kind of approach it like that, but it doesn't need to be done like that. As long as you stick to the process, you'll get the results. So the first part of a TSS would be meet with your stakeholders and SMEs. Understand what the current problem is. I always say go into the engagement, go into those conversations with the mind of a novice, not an expert. I go in with a clean mind thinking, I don't know the solution, that I don't know what their problem is. Because if I go in thinking I already know what the solution is, I'm going to probably miss the problem. And we have gone into clients where they thought they knew 100% what the problem was, and through a really in-depth analysis, it was not their problem. The next thing you do is you actually do your deliverables and findings. Document your areas of concern, your issues, your findings. Look for common threads. Look for common core. Look for things that keep popping up over and over in different work streams. If everyone is saying, well, our training is not good, our training is not good, let's look more in depth at that and see where our training is falling down. The third part is, and this will kind of help you sell it to leadership. It's really hard to sell projects the farther up the chain you go into the C-suite level and above, unless you can put a cost to it. So what you need to do is conduct a cost benefit analysis and demonstrate the value of moving to the next level. A minute ago, I talked about every time someone touches a claim, it costs you $11. That's a cost. So if I was looking at investing to get my auto adjudication rate up in my system, I put all those costs in there. I would actually pull some data and say, on average, we touch claims 8 times. That's $88 in administrative costs. And then you look at ways to mitigate that. Do we need to touch it at all? Can we auto adjudicate it by what we talked about, making our forms, products, contracts standard? Standardization is our best benefit. Standard contracts, standard plans gives us standard results. The last thing is you kind of do a deliverable roadmap. So once you show the cost benefit analysis, you get some sign off on how to go, then just do your roadmap. This is what we're going to do, and this is what we expect to find. And that way you can show in real time with real money how you're going to mature a functional area. So when you're looking at your TSS and you're looking at what should I even put in scope of a TSS? So really anything can be in scope of a TSS. So you can look at your technology, my claim system, my call system, my IVR. You can look at human performance. I think I mentioned before, we've done this for a couple of clients. I remember a client told me that every single one of their claims examiners is an idiot and needs to be fired because they can't hit metrics. No one's hitting. Well, you are going to have a certain percentage of people that are probably not well suited for the job. But if 100% are not hitting quality and production and things like that, something else is wrong. There's a human performance or organizational issue. Really, when you, like I said, data and interview, that is where you really get your details. And I love, just because I'm a finance person, data is your fun friend, your fun friend, your fun or your friend. So look at the data. When you're looking at something like AA, pull why things are falling out. Actually dig down to see why. Sometimes with things, auto adjudication rules, for example, you told 5 years ago, a rule was written that we had to pull out physical therapy claims because we didn't have the right modifiers built in the system. The modifiers are now built in the system. We forgot to remove that rule that told our claim engine not to dump those claims out of auto adjudication. So really the key is reoccurring errors, looking at the data and finding ways to make it better. So at the conclusion of your TSS, you know, your little project team, you can be as narrow or as wide as you want. I would say the first time you do something, let's start narrow. Start looking at, you know, just certain claim types or your call system or your IVR. Keep it small and get that familiarity with the process before you go forward. But you usually would do a delivery. You're going to tell your findings, your recommendations, and then you're going to give a roadmap. The key I keep saying, as far as your findings, do that return on investment. Take the time to look at the dollars and cents. Actually pull the salaries of the people that are doing the work and actually determine the actual cost. And then when you're looking at the cost of the project, make sure that's integrated as well. Sometimes we only think the cost of the project is the project manager and the IT configuration resources. That's not always the case. You know, anytime you send out a letter to your customers, you know, 10% call in. All those are costs. So make sure and do a fully integrated cost analysis so you understand what you're getting. So when we talk about common solutions, recommendations, things that when I'm going out with some of my consulting folks and doing these, what I see over and over again are business configuration updates to the system, your service groups, your PINs, your authorization edits, anything that tells your claim system not to auto adjudicate. Pull a report and see why things are falling out. Look at the ones that you can address. Some have to fall out until you have a non-standard contract. Until you can get that fixed, you have to fall out. But really look at what's falling out and make the determination on if it's necessary. Look at your workflow routing rules. Are you getting the claim to the right person that has the right skill set to do a one and done? Look at your access governments and your roles assignments. And the last thing would be core platform. And I know this is sometimes out of reach because to do a rip and replace of a core platform can be financially astronomical at times. But really look, if you're on a homegrown system that has an AA rate of 30%, look at some of the other ones that are out there that could better support you. You would also look at, when you were looking at root causes, some of the processes. So it's just internal processes efficiencies. I'm amazed how many clients and organizations, and I've been part of organizations that have the same issue, that we had outdated or missing policies, procedures, or job aids. We expect people to read our minds and do something, but we've never told them how to do it. We've never put forward what is the correct way to do it. So we can't be surprised when the outcome we get is non-standard, when we don't standardize what we want folks to do. The other part of the process is audit controls. Most folks do a daily claim audit. Your 5% of random, things like that. We do call audits. We do audits of config updates, audits of provider updates. But sometimes you have to go a little deeper than that and do some focus audits and things like that that you're seeing that are reoccurring, not with the goal of penalizing anyone. The goal isn't to penalize with audits. The goal is to find out what we missed as an organization in training or config that we can help our folks. The majority of people come to work every day wanting to do a good job. The other thing when we're talking about is making sure you have the right people to do the function. Sometimes you have a really, really good claims examiner, you promote them to a supervisor, but you don't give them any of the supervisor skills. So make sure you have the right person in the right seat and actually look at your key people and make sure that's true. Make sure you have clearly defined and socialized roles and responsibility. If I'm an auditor, I should know what falls under my purview. I should know that every day, these are the 10 things I have to get done. These are my controls, and this is what I have to do it with. Offloading non-core functions and right-sizing staffing. I think people get worried about that because we worry that we're getting rid of jobs. That is almost always not the case. What normally happens with something like this, you just don't replace. You have natural attrition or people are promoted and you don't replace those rules. So sometimes when you talk about this, people freak out because no one wants to be responsible for someone no longer having employment, obviously. But that is not the goal of this. The goal of this is to take those people with functioning brains and things like that that can make these decisions and let them do value-added tasks. So that was a lot of information that I went through. Are there any questions or anything I can help clarify in any way?
I did receive, Christine, a few questions in the chat. I think I've captured all of them. But first, thanks, Christine. You're obviously very well spoken and I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this with all of us. So a few questions I received. I'm going to go ahead and start off with one on the top of my list. What is the most common waste of administrative dollars you see? I think I said that. Yep. What is the most common waste of administrative dollars that you see?
Okay, the most common waste of administrative dollars is usually in your claim engine. Sometimes I want to say it's executive bonuses and salaries, but I'll defer from saying that. I'll say the things that I can control as far as administrative costs are your low auto adjudication rates. It's just, you got to get up into the 90s, the mid 90s, the high 90s. And there are ways to do that. If you have a system that you think isn't optimal, you can look at replacing or bolting things on or putting macros and workflow onto your system. The key to administrative costs of the things that we can control is standardize, standardize, standardize. So standardize your contracts, standardize your system, standardize your reporting. The exceptions really should be the exceptions. They shouldn't be 30% of your business.
Thanks, Christine. The next one I have here, what changes give the best bang for your buck? And as I read this, I think it's a really interesting question, Christine, because in my mind, there are several ways to answer this, right? Driven by what the focus of the TSS or the assessment is, whether that's claims, contact center configuration, utilization management, or provider data management, right?
Yep.
But Christine, what are your thoughts when you're asked, what changes give the best bang for your buck? Where does your mind go?
My mind goes kind of it depends on the department. If I was looking at call service, I would say IVR and self-service. That can be done either through the call or the web.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm looking at provider data, standardization. I know I should have it tattooed on my forehead. Standardize your contracts, standardize your products. If you have non-standard contracts, there are OCR capabilities that can kind of pull the data from them so that you have a clear data lake of that data. If you're in claims, it's AA all day long. You got to get the auto adjudication rate up. If we're looking at UM is expensive. Prior authorizations are expensive. It's a process that's a manual process. You need an actual person to look at these. But look at the things you're pre-authorizing. I've gone into some companies that said, well, we pre-authorize this X-ray because it's a high dollar X-ray. Or they authorize scopies. No one gets a scopy unless they have to get a scopy. And if you look at the approval rate, you're approving them over 99% of the time. So you have to look at the business decisions behind that and your bang for your buck.
Thanks, Christine. I received another one. What percentage of administrative problems require another solution or some type of vendor outsourcing? And furthermore, do you have any guidance for buying on those instances, as we know they sometimes require more dollars upfront for various reasons? So I'll say that one more time because there's probably quite a bit done out there. What percentage of administrative problems require another solution or some type of vendor outsourcing? And do you have any guidance for buying on those instances?
It kind of depends on the organization. If I'm dealing with one of the big guys, if I'm talking to Cigna and those guys, they have the internal resources that if we help them figure out what's wrong, they can do it. If it's a smaller plan, you probably don't have the bandwidth to do a bunch of configuration to your system or to go in and really look at these details. So it depends on your individual corporation, the bandwidth you have internally. All of these, if you have a bandwidth, could be done internally. If you're saying we're barely keeping our head above water, I always say if you're barely keeping your head above water and you're not to keep yourself from drowning, it's hard to work on your breaststroke. You're just trying not to drown. So if you're trying not to drown and you don't have the bandwidth, then you could outsource the majority of these. You could start with, a configuration assessment, see what your configuration is doing. You could decide that you don't want the administrative burden of paying your claims and outsource that whole area. Outsource the OCR function or things like that. It really there's not a strict percentage because it could be anywhere from 0 to you could outsource. We have plans that seem like they outsource everything. And the only thing that they're not outsourcing is the C-suite. It just really depends on your plan and your bandwidth internally. I know that's not the best answer, so sorry. I like to give actual percentages. 0 to 100.
Thanks, Christine. I think that was good. And for me personally, it resonates. It makes sense. So I appreciate you covering that. I've got one more question in front of me here. Do you have an example of where the plan thought the error was one thing and turned out to be something totally different?
We did. I went into a fairly large plan and they were sure that their service groupers were impacting their auto adjudication rate and their prior authorization attachment. and that we just had to look at their service groupers, what CPT codes are grouped together under a particular service grouper. So I went in and pulled a lot of data, pulled a lot of reporting. That wasn't their problem. Their service groupers needed a little tweaking, but that wasn't the issue. The issue was their alignment of their configuration wasn't in the correct administrative order. So they had things, that's the easiest example we saw was a person wasn't eligible. That should hit that edit first. The hierarchy of edit should be, you have to be eligible employee for it to go any farther in your workflow. The hierarchy was set up incorrect. It bypassed that and went to someone to look at the modifiers. I mean, the hierarchy structure was just wrong, and that's what was driving the bulk of their auto adjudication problem. So it wasn't a grouper issue. And I think that just sometimes when you're there every day and you're looking at your reports every day and you're talking to your folks every day, you have the mindset of what you think the issue is and what you think the solve is. And that's why I was talking before, and I said, I go into it and my team goes into it. And this is how you really have to go into it internally if you're doing this yourself, with a novice mindset. Pretend like you don't know anything about it. Ask the questions that you think you know the answer of when you're doing those interviews and you're talking to those stakeholders. And that's how you'll get those little nuggets of truth. Pull the reporting and really dig into it without the expectation of thinking you know what you're going to see, if that makes sense.
It does, to me at least. Thank you, Christine. I appreciate that. That is the extent of the list of questions that I have received in this session. But real quick, as you can all see on your screen, should there be any additional questions that you might think of as soon as we end our webinar, feel free to reach out to any one of us, right? Specifically on your screen, you have calosolutions.com/contact. We do have a dedicated inbox, info@calosolutions.com, where you can send any of your inquiries to. But that being said, you're not limited to just that. You can also reach out to Mr. Lon Waterman, who is our Vice President of Sales here at Catalyst. You can see his contact information reflected there, both an email and phone number. And then, of course, Christine's information here as well. With that, Christine, is there anything else that you'd like to share, or any final thoughts before we close out here?
No, I would just wish everyone luck in their review. Remember that standardization word. That's your key to everything. And if you have any further questions, my email's down here. I'd love to hear from you, or on LinkedIn, just, shoot me a question on LinkedIn, because really my goal is to make healthcare more efficient and make it better for our members. So especially when I deal with our Medicaid and Medicare members, our most vulnerable. So any way I can do that, would be happy to help.
All right.
And thanks for joining us. Have a great short week.
Thanks, Christine. And like I said, we will go ahead and send a video link of this out afterwards so that you all can reference it. And should you be so inclined to share with your team members as well, we would appreciate that. Otherwise, we'd love to hear from you, and have a great week.
Have a great week.
Take care.